You see the same number twice in one day, and before the feeling has even settled in your chest, your mind already knows what to do. Screenshot it, search it, decode it. Maybe it means money is coming. Maybe it means love is near. Maybe it means your vibration is rising. The internet has trained you to treat every strange little moment like a notification from the universe, as if reality has become a spiritual phone screen and every coincidence is just another message waiting to be opened. But Carl Jung didn't mean that. Not really. Synchronicity for Jung was never supposed to be a cheap little fortune cookie wrapped in mystical language. It wasn't meant to turn your life into a guessing game where every license plate, every song lyric, every repeated number, and every random animal crossing your path becomes proof that the cosmos is personally managing your schedule. Something much deeper was being pointed toward. Something quieter, stranger, more demanding. Jung wasn't asking you to collect signs, he was asking you to pay attention to meaning. And that's where the whole thing changes. Because a coincidence is easy. A coincidence happens and then disappears. You notice it, smile for a second, maybe tell someone about it, and then move on. But synchronicity, real synchronicity, doesn't just entertain you. It disturbs you a little. It touches something underneath the surface. It arrives at the exact point where your outer life and inner life seem to look at each other across the room and recognize one another. Not because one caused the other. Not because you manifested a bird onto your windowsill or forced the clock to show a certain number, but because, for one brief moment, the visible world and the hidden world seem to be speaking the same language. Modern spirituality has a strange habit. It takes deep ideas, cuts off the roots, polishes the surface, and turns them into something easy to share. Jung's shadow becomes your toxic traits. The ego becomes bad. The self becomes your highest version, and synchronicity becomes angel numbers. It's not always done with bad intentions. Most people are just trying to understand something they've genuinely felt. A pattern appears, a dream repeats, a strange event happens at the exact emotional moment when you needed it, and naturally you wonder, was that supposed to mean something? That question is human, ancient even. People have been asking it around fires in temples beside rivers, and in the silence after grief for thousands of years. The problem starts when the question gets answered too quickly. The internet doesn't like mystery. Mystery slows everything down. Mystery asks you to sit with discomfort, to listen, to wonder, to admit that maybe the meaning isn't obvious yet. But the internet wants a caption, a number chart, a save this if you saw 222 today post. Before the soul has even had time to whisper, the algorithm has already handed you a definition. And honestly, that's the part that ruins it. Not because symbols can't matter. They can. Not because repeated numbers or strange coincidences are always meaningless. They're not. But because meaning can't be mass-produced and handed to everyone in the same packaging. Think of it like finding a key on the floor. Just because it's a key doesn't mean it opens your door. It might open someone else's. It might open nothing anymore. It might simply be a key that fell from a pocket. But if you find it on the exact day you've been wrestling with whether to leave a locked chapter of your life behind, and something in you stops, not in a dramatic way, not like thunder from heaven, but in that small, unmistakable inner pause, then the question changes. The key still didn't cause your situation. Your situation didn't cause the key to appear. Yet the meeting between the two may carry meaning, not because an app told you so, because your psyche, your life, and the moment itself formed a pattern that asked to be understood. Jung called synchronicity a causal connecting principle. Fancy phrase, yes, but don't let it scare you. It simply means a connection that isn't based on cause and effect. One thing didn't push the other into happening like a ball hitting another ball on a table. Instead, two things line up through meaning. Your inner state and an outer event meet without a visible mechanical link. Science can still ask where and when the event happened. That matters. Jung wasn't throwing reality out the window and replacing it with fantasy. Space matters. Time matters. What actually happened matters. But once the facts are placed on the table, another question begins breathing beneath them. Why did this matter to you, here now in this exact season of your life? And once you ask that question honestly, you're no longer scrolling through signs like entertainment. You're entering a conversation. A coincidence by itself is not sacred. It's just a crossing of events. You think of someone, and they text you. You hear a word in the morning, then see the same word on a billboard later. You dream of water, then it rains the next day. These things can be interesting, sure, sometimes funny, sometimes eerie, but Jung would ask for more. He'd want to know what the event touched in you, what was moving in your unconscious at the time, what emotional charge did the moment carry, what story was unfolding in your life when the coincidence appeared. Without that deeper inquiry, the whole thing remains on the surface, like looking at ripples in a lake and never wondering what moved underneath. Real synchronicity has weight, not always dramatic weight, but inner weight. There's a feeling of being addressed, although not by a voice in the ordinary sense. More like life has placed a symbol in front of you and asked, "Are you awake enough to notice what's happening inside you?" Imagine someone who has spent months feeling trapped in a life that looks successful from the outside, but feels dead on the inside. Good job, nice apartment, polite conversations, everything in order. Yet every night, something in them feels like a bird pressing against a cage. Then one morning, on the way to work, they see a small bird trapped inside a train station, flying again and again against the glass, unable to find the open door just a few feet away. Now, in a purely causal sense, nothing magical has happened. Birds get trapped, stations have glass, people go to work, end of story. But psychologically, something else may be happening. The outer image mirrors the inner condition, not because the person caused the bird to appear, not because the bird is a sign in the childish sense of being a cosmic text message. The moment becomes meaningful because it reveals something. It gives form to an inner truth that has been felt but not fully seen. Suddenly the person doesn't just think, "I'm stuck." They see stuckness. They witness it with their whole body. That's different. A symbol has entered the room, and symbols don't explain like lectures do. They awaken, they point, they disturb the comfortable lie. Dreams work in a similar way. In a dream, things don't behave according to normal cause and effect. One image flows into another. A childhood home becomes a forest. A stranger wears the face of someone you love. A locked door appears in a room you've never seen, but somehow recognize. If you try to understand a dream, like a logical report, you'll flatten it. You'll ask, why did this happen after that? But dreams ask for a different kind of attention. They ask, what does this image mean? What does it connect to? What part of you is speaking through it? Synchronicity belongs to that same symbolic atmosphere, except the dream seems to step outside and meet you in waking life. Ancient people understood this more naturally than modern people do. Not perfectly, of course. They had their own superstitions and projections like we do, but they didn't live with the same hard wall between inner life and outer world. A raven, a storm, a cracked vessel, a sudden silence in the marketplace. These could all become meaningful if they appeared at the right moment within the right story. As above, so below, the old Hermetic phrase says. Not because everything is a literal code, not because every cloud shape needs interpretation, but because human beings live in two worlds at once, the measurable world of space and time, and the inner world of image, feeling, memory, desire, fear, and myth. Synchronicity happens where those worlds brush against each other, and that brushing is delicate. Too much certainty ruins it. Too much skepticism kills it. The soul needs a middle path. Jung's idea becomes much richer once you understand that synchronicity wasn't floating around by itself. It was connected to his whole vision of the psyche. For him, the human being wasn't just an ego with thoughts, plans, and opinions. The ego is important, yes. You need it to function. You need it to remember your name, pay bills, make choices, answer messages, and not wander into traffic because a cloud looked symbolic. But the ego is not the whole person. It's more like the lit candle in a dark cathedral. Useful, bright, necessary, but not large enough to contain the entire building. Behind and beneath the ego, Jung saw the unconscious, not just personal memories, old wounds, forgotten desires or repressed emotions, though those matter too. He also described something collective, deep patterns shared across humanity. These are the archetypes. The word itself points to original patterns, first blueprints, ancient forms of human experience. The mother, the hero, the wise old man, the trickster, the shadow, the child, the king, the wanderer. You don't need a psychology degree to recognize them. You've felt them in stories since you were young. The old guide who appears when the hero is lost. The dark double who exposes what the hero refuses to face. The child who carries innocence, renewal, and future life. These patterns aren't just invented by writers. Writers borrow them because the psyche already knows them. Synchronicity, in Jung's deeper sense, often rests on these archetypal foundations. Meaningful coincidences become powerful when they connect your personal situation to something larger than your personal story. Say someone is going through a painful ending, a relationship breaks, a dream dies, a version of life collapses. Then, during that season, images of death and rebirth begin appearing everywhere, not in a forced way, not because they're searching for them online all day, but naturally. A tree cut down begins sprouting again. A snake sheds its skin in a documentary randomly playing in the background. A dream arrives of walking through ashes and finding a green field. Again, none of these events cause the transformation, but they may constellate around an archetypal pattern, death and renewal. Something old is ending, something unknown is trying to be born. Here's where the internet often goes wrong. It makes the ego the main character of every sign. You saw this because you're chosen. You saw this because your manifestation is arriving. You saw this because the universe wants you to know you're special. And listen, there's a reason that feels good. Everyone wants reassurance. Everyone wants to feel held by something greater. But Jung was careful about inflation, or what we could call spiritual grandiosity. Archetypes are powerful. The self is vast. The unconscious is not a toy box for the ego to decorate itself with. When someone starts believing every coincidence proves their superiority, their destiny, their magical importance, they're no longer listening to the symbol. They're using the symbol as a mirror for vanity. The self points to something much larger than the ego. Jung used it to describe the totality of the psyche, the conscious and unconscious together. Not the self you perform online, not the personal brand, not the version of you that has the right aesthetic, the right language, the right spiritual vocabulary. The self is the deeper organizing principle in the psyche, the path that pulls you toward wholeness. Sometimes gently, sometimes through crisis, sometimes through dreams, symptoms, failures, attractions, breakdowns, and yes, sometimes through strange, meaningful coincidences that arrive like a knock at the door. So when synchronicity appears, the real question isn't, what can I get from this? It's, what is trying to become conscious through this? Jung cared deeply about individuation. That word can sound cold, but the experience itself is anything but cold. Individuation means becoming whole, not perfect, not spiritually polished, not permanently calm, whole. It means gathering the rejected pieces of yourself, facing the shadow without making a religion out of shame, listening to dreams without drowning in fantasy, and allowing the ego to serve something deeper than its own control. In plain language, it means becoming who you actually are beneath the roles, defenses, borrowed beliefs, and survival patterns you once mistook for identity. Synchronicity matters because it can interrupt the ego's narrow little hallway. Most days, the ego walks back and forth inside familiar thoughts. I know who I am. I know what matters. I know what's possible. I know what life is. Then something happens that doesn't fit the hallway. A symbol appears at the wrong time, or maybe the right time. A phrase follows you for weeks. A dream and a waking event echo each other. A stranger says a sentence that lands with impossible precision. The ego wants to either dismiss it or possess it. It's nothing, or it proves everything. But the deeper response is slower. Let me listen. Listening doesn't mean believing every coincidence is divine instruction. Please know, that road gets messy fast. Listening means entering into relationship with the moment. You ask what it stirs, you ask what it reveals, you ask where it meets your life honestly, not where you want it to flatter you. A real sign may comfort you, but it may also confront you. It may not tell you that your dream life is arriving tomorrow. It may show you that you've been avoiding grief. It may reveal the part of you still waiting for permission. It may expose the old pattern you keep dressing up as intuition. Sometimes synchronicity doesn't say, keep going. Sometimes it says, wake up. You're repeating the same wound in a new costume. That's why quick online interpretations can be so dangerous. Not dangerous in some dramatic horror movie sense, but dangerous to depth. They can replace your own inner dialogue. A symbol that belongs to your soul gets handed over to a stranger's template. You stop asking, what does this mean in the story of my life? And start asking, what does the internet say this means? Slowly, your relationship with meaning becomes outsourced. And once meaning is outsourced, the self has to speak louder. Maybe through discomfort, maybe through repeated dreams, maybe through that strange empty feeling you get after consuming too much spiritual content, but not actually changing anything. A small parable fits here. A student once asked an old teacher how to know whether an omen was real. The teacher pointed to a cup of tea and said, if the cup is empty, the rain can fill it. If the cup is already full, even the sky has nowhere to enter. The student thought the teacher was being poetic, maybe avoiding the question. But years later, after chasing signs everywhere and finding only confusion, the student understood. A mind stuffed with ready-made meanings can't receive revelation. It can only compare, label, and consume. Synchronicity requires an empty enough cup, not ignorance, not gullibility, openness. From here, the whole subject becomes less about signs and more about relationship. Your relationship with your unconscious, your relationship with reality, your relationship with the unknown. Synchronicity doesn't ask you to abandon reason. It asks reason to stop pretending it owns the entire house. There's objective reality, where and when something happened, what led to it, what can be verified. And there's subjective reality, what the event meant, what it awakened, what inner pattern it touched. A mature person needs both. Too much rationality makes life dry and dead. Too much fantasy makes life chaotic and ungrounded. Jung was searching for the bridge, and maybe that's what has been missing. The bridge.